The sharp chirping of the phone shattered the silence in our bedroom, cutting through the calm like a blade. That sound usually meant one of two things: a late-night work emergency for Maddie, or my mother calling to rant about her neighbor's mischievous cat. The digital clock on my nightstand read 1:17 a.m. I was halfway to sleep after a grueling day at the hospital. Maddie, however, was a light sleeper. Her hand shot out to grab the phone from the charger. "Hello," she mumbled groggily, her voice soft and hesitant. The kind of tone you use when you're not expecting someone to call at such an hour. "Yeah, it's me." "No, it's fine, just a scheduling thing." "Okay. Yeah, tomorrow's fine." "All right, bye." Her voice was deliberately low as she ended the call and placed the phone back on the nightstand. She slid back under the covers, but something felt off. Normally, Maddie would snuggle close, her warmth a comfort that lulled me to sleep. But this time, she seemed stiff and distant. My drowsy mind, still wrapped in the fog of exhaustion, picked up on a faint discord, like a wrong note in a familiar tune. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice a low rumble in the dark. "Oh, just a coworker," she replied quickly. Her tone was tight, with a strange edge of nervousness I couldn't quite place. There was a scheduling issue for tomorrow. I grunted, letting the explanation slide for the moment. Maddie's colleagues at her advertising agency often called at odd hours. Tight deadlines were part of her job, but something about the way she spoke lingered, tugging at my subconscious. I tried to fall back asleep, but unease gnawed at me. Her words felt rehearsed, too smooth, like they'd been practiced. A strange discomfort settled in my gut, a feeling I'd never experienced before. It was as if the universe was sending me a signal, a frequency my tired mind couldn't yet decode. Morning arrived, sunlight filtering through the curtains. Maddie left for work, her usual peck on the cheek strangely hollow. The nagging feeling from the night before hadn't faded. It clung to me, persistent and heavy. Once she was gone, I reached for her phone. The last call wasn't from a saved contact. It was an unknown number. My heart started pounding, each beat loud and unsteady. Without thinking, I pressed redial. The phone rang twice before a man's voice answered, deep, smooth, and unfamiliar. "Hello." My throat tightened. Words stuck somewhere between my mind and my mouth. My heart raced as a cold dread crept through me. I hung up without saying a word, my hand trembling as I placed the phone back on the nightstand. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. My world, once steady and secure, tilted violently off balance. It wasn't a coworker. Maddie, my Maddie, the woman I had loved and trusted for 8 long years, had lied to me. The realization crashed over me like a tidal wave, each surge stronger and more devastating than the last. A sickening sense of betrayal churned in my chest. My head spun, my thoughts a chaotic blur. In the space of a single night, the foundation of everything I believed in had cracked, leaving me adrift in a sea of doubt and heartbreak. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my legs suddenly too weak to hold me. This couldn't be happening. Not to us. The rest of the day passed in a haze. At the hospital, the steady rhythm of work, the faces, the procedures, the endless tasks blurred together. I felt like an outsider in my own life, a ghost merely going through the motions while a storm raged inside me. Every thought of Maddie, every memory we shared, was now laced with suspicion, poisoned by the cold truth of her deception. I didn't confront her right away. I couldn't. Not until I had a plan. Not until I was ready to look her in the eye and demand the truth. Instead, I moved through the day like a shadow, my body on autopilot. As my mind crafted what I would do next, I wouldn't be the pitiful husband who simply crumbled under the weight of betrayal. No, I would orchestrate my own symphony of consequences, a masterpiece where she unknowingly played the leading role in her own downfall. That evening, Maddie walked through the door, her smile as bright and fake as a plastic doll's. "Hey, honey, how was your day?" she asked, leaning in to plant a quick kiss on my cheek. The touch, once comforting, now felt like a toxin seeping into my skin. It was okay, I replied flatly, my voice void of warmth. How was yours? I sat on the couch, pretending to read a book, the pages a mere prop for the charade. Maddie began talking about work, deadlines, brainstorming sessions, meetings. Her words floated around me, meaningless background noise, as my mind replayed the events of the morning. The man's voice on the phone, deep and smooth, the kind of voice that couldn't belong to just any coworker. It was surreal, like watching a scene from a bad drama where I was cast as the oblivious husband, and she was a villain spinning lies. You know, I said casually, closing my book and setting it aside, there was a missed call on your phone last night. Her hand froze mid-gesture, the color draining from her face. Funny thing, I continued, my tone deceptively light. I redialed the number this morning. Someone answered, her eyes widened in panic, the mask of calm shattering instantly. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, frozen, her breathing shallow. The fear in her eyes was undeniable, and it struck a dark chord deep within me, a satisfaction I hadn't expected. What are you talking about? She stammered, her voice barely audible. The number, Maddie, I said, my tone firm and unyielding. The one that called you at 1:17 a.m. You said it was a coworker, but when I called, a man answered. He said, hello. I leaned forward slightly, locking my gaze onto hers, my voice cold and measured. Did you forget to tell him not to answer when your husband calls? Her breath hitched audibly. She took a small, instinctive step back, her hands fluttering aimlessly at her sides like broken wings. The Maddie I thought I knew, the confident, loving partner, was now a stranger, cornered and desperate. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Every second felt like an eternity as I watched her crumble under the weight of my words. For the first time, the game had turned, and I wasn't a fool anymore. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, her voice trembling, barely above a whisper. Her denial was weak, a feeble attempt to escape the inevitable. The lies hung in the air like fragile spiderwebs, ready to collapse under the weight of the truth. Really? I asked, leaning forward, my gaze piercing hers. Are you sure about that? The answer was written all over her face. I could see the falsehood in her wide, terrified eyes. The deceit seemed to fill the room, a heavy, suffocating presence. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. With my back turned to her, I continued speaking. I knew this would unsettle her even more. I'm not an idiot, Maddie, I began, my voice calm but sharp. I work with trauma patients every day. Reading people, spotting their tells, is second nature to me. And let me tell you, your performance tonight is awful. I pause, letting the words sink in before delivering the final blow. You've been caught. You can stop pretending now. The silence that followed was deafening. Maddie stared at the floor, her body rigid. It wasn't the silence of innocence. It was the silence of the guilty, of someone cornered and exposed. I know you were out of town last week for a conference, I continued, turning to face her. What I don't know is why you were staying at a cheap hotel with someone who wasn't your husband. She looked up at me, pale and trembling. The confident, self-assured woman I had loved for years was gone, replaced by a frightened, guilty child. It was a sad sight, but I couldn't deny the grim satisfaction I felt watching her world collapse. Who is he, Maddie? I asked coldly, my voice devoid of any emotion. She didn't answer. Instead, she crumpled to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Her tears didn't move me. They felt just as false as the lies she'd been feeding me. I don't know what to say, she whispered through her sobs. Don't say anything, I interrupted, my tone steely. I'm done with your lies. I'm done with you. I turned and walked to the bedroom, grabbing a bag and stuffing it with clothes. Staying in the same house with her was unthinkable. I couldn't bear the sight of her, When I returned to the living room, she was still sobbing on the floor. Her cries followed me as I headed for the door. "Where are you going?" she called out, panic in her voice. "Away from you," I replied without turning back. "I've already called a lawyer. The process has started." I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I simply closed it behind me, walked out of the house, and out of my marriage. For the first time in a long time, I felt no regrets. My life was going to change, yes, maybe even be a little lonely at first. But I knew one thing for sure. I would never again share my life with someone who had betrayed me so deeply. In the days that followed, I moved into a small apartment. The divorce was messy, but her desperate attempts to justify her actions were even messier. I let my lawyer handle everything, refusing to argue or engage with her. After months of negotiations, it was over. Maddie was gone from my life, permanently. With the divorce finalized, I decided to start fresh in a new city, a place where no one knew my past. I took time to travel, rediscover myself in the process. For the first time in months, I felt free. The world, once dark and suffocating, seemed full of possibilities. One afternoon, as I sat in a cozy coffee shop with a book in hand, a familiar figure walked in. It was him, the man from the phone that night. He was with Maddie. Our eyes met, and his face turned ghostly pale. Maddie followed his gaze and froze when she saw me. Her mouth dropped open, her expression one of utter disbelief, as if she were staring at a ghost. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Instead, I gave them a small, knowing smile and turned back to my book. They were trapped in their web of lies, bound together by the chains of their own deceit. And me? I was finally free.